personal level, which goes into this next contribution from Twitter, is not being able to have an opinion. So it's like if someone, so at Luch Professor on Twitter says the cult-like following of a wrestler or a certain promotion, if you criticize one thing, there's a mob attack. So during the Chyna documentary, I was very emotional watching that, as you can imagine, and I was live tweeting it. And just seeing, I was reminded of like how much Chyna was a part of pop culture and TV show appearances, magazine covers, red carpets. And it just reminded me of when Becky Lynch was on her role and everyone was saying like how she's the first female face of the company, which I don't believe is true. I think Chyna can definitely be said to be one of the first female faces of WWE. And even prior to that, you can say like Wendy Richter back in like the 80s. So I don't think Becky Lynch was the first. I tweeted that, and like we got attacked so bad on Twitter. I learned that we were known as the account that bashes Becky, so false narratives. Yeah, right. False narratives that go on Twitter. Like people, you write one thing that's critical of a wrestler that someone loves, and all of a sudden you're known as the account that attacks Becky. So I think this goes to what they said, that cult like following. Like we lost followers. We've had people block us. We also gained followers with that comment. But my thing is like we should be able to have an open conversation about these kind of topics and disagree, and it be fun. Okay. You know what I mean?
I agree, and I kind of want to touch on that because
please.
It's about Chyna being the face of WWE opposed to Becky being the first face. So here's my take on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that Chyna was a face, the first female face in WWE. I do believe it was Becky, and here's why I say this. Yes, Chyna was very pivotal. Chyna was a staple in the Attitude Era for us. So I feel like because she was that woman that we saw who wasn't like the ordinary women, we as fans made her that face. But when you come to think about it, WWE did not make her that. We wanted her to be that. So we as fans claimed her to be that face. But if you look at it, Becky Lynch is that first face because of how WWE packaged her. Because how WWE put her as the first female on a 2K game, because how WWE made her the man, and she was, in the ring with Austin and The Rock. Chyna was also in the ring with Austin and The Rock, but that is as a fighter, not as her pushing something, not as, Becky crashing and breaking that glass ceiling of the all men's club, So yes, I believe that Becky is the first female face of WWE. Because look at Attitude Era. Women were not being pushed the way they pushed Becky to be that face. Not saying that Chyna did not do what she was supposed to do, because we saw her. We absolutely saw Chyna. I'm not taking nothing from Chyna at all. There'll be no Becky Lynch if it wasn't a Chyna,
right,
in my opinion. But because we love Chyna so much, we decided to say that she was that face. But if you really go back and look at it, Chyna was Chyna, and no female was the face of WWE as Becky Lynch was the face now. At 2019.
Like that's where I disagree, because, and I don't want this to turn into a conversation about this, but
no.
When it comes to what females were representing WWE at the time that Chyna was on red carpets. She crossed over pop culture. She was on the cover of Playboy. She made history doing these things.
No, you're absolutely
so people
right.
act like Becky Lynch was the first woman to ever cross over into that mainstream. That's what I mean about being the face and representing WWE. So my thing was saying like Becky wasn't the first woman that WWE ever put in that spotlight, because if you think about the Attitude Era, Chyna's the only woman that you can name in the same vein as Stone Cold,
right,
The Rock, all that. So that's what I mean when I'm saying like a woman definitely was a face of WWE before Becky Lynch. Like, it's not like that was the first time that this ever happened, that a woman, you know, was in a movie or anything like that. Like, Chyna was
right.
doing all of that. So that was my only point in the tweet, was like, Becky was not the only woman that WWE cared about. Like, Chyna at one point, she was wrestling men, you know, like she was.
So maybe we should change
you know
the
what
wording
I mean?
of it, because when we say face, we think of, you know, the way they position Becky. You understand, like face of the company. So maybe we should change the wording, because I agree with you. Chyna did all that way before Becky. Yeah. We really didn't see it in Trish Stratus. We didn't see it in Lita. We didn't see it in Jackie. We didn't see it in Jazz. We didn't see it in Victoria. We saw it in Chyna.
Right. And
but
people
if you're
knew
gonna
who
say
Chyna
the first
was.
face of,
and don't watch wrestling, and people could identify, you know, with Chyna. And I was reminded of all of that in that documentary. Like, oh shit, like she was on all these TV shows, and I watched shows from like the late 90s, early 2000s, and people mentioned Chyna in passing as like a symbol of like a strong woman. So for me, it's like, okay, like wow, she really crossed over. You know, no one has ever done it like Becky Lynch at this point, and I would never, like, Becky Lynch is a shit. And this goes to more of the narrative that people have about us on wrestling Twitter, because we're like, right. My thing is, if you think we're the account that bashes Becky, then you're not paying attention to what our Twitter account is about. Because I said it when I was responding to people for that short amount of time, Krista B is the biggest Becky Lynch fan I know. So
period.
So I'm like, for y'all to think that we're the ones that, and my thing is, we can be critical of a wrestler we love, like, like that's okay.
That's how you're a real fan. Like, you're not gonna just sit here and applaud them for their praise and not call them on their bullshit. Like me and you just had this conversation. We both love Chyna. Mm-hmm. I just feel like because we're using the word face of, we're bringing it two different definitions. Right. Like if we change the wording up a bit. Yes, Becky was the face of WWE because that's how WWE packaged her to put her this and third. Yes, Chyna was the main woman's face that we saw because it was a representation of the Attitude Era, but they didn't package her in the way that they packaged Becky. Yeah. Not taken away from either one of them. Chyna did go mainstream. Chyna did cross over. Chyna did, you know, open those doors for these women to do it. So not taking anything from Chyna, not taking anything from Becky. I feel like it's just two different times and two different ways that things are being packaged. Now they could come after me because I said, oh nah, Becky is, because if you really look at it, Becky was. Chyna was not the face of because she wasn't packaged that way from the company. Not saying because she didn't cross over, not saying because she didn't do all these hits, not saying any of that. It's because she wasn't packaged that way. And we're fine. We have
exactly, and that doesn't mean that we don't like Chyna. We're not Chyna fans anymore. This doesn't mean we're bashing her. This doesn't mean I'm bashing Becky Lynch. And again, if anyone thinks that we're the account that bashes Becky Lynch, you're not paying attention at all.
We're not paying attention.
We're probably the biggest Becky Lynch fans. Right. And also, I can be critical of a female wrestler and still be a fan of them. Like, people were like, oh, I thought you liked Becky Lynch. Like, I can be critical of that. I was one of the main people that was like, okay, I feel like Becky's getting stale. I'm ready, I'm ready for something new, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was the main person. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not one of the biggest Becky Lynch fans, like, of life. You know what I mean? So I love, like, let's normalize disagreeing with each other again on Twitter. Like, wrestling at the end of the day is subjective. Like, there's still someone that decides who is it. Like, there's still someone that decides who wins. So the fact that you guys are, people take, everything that we say, like, so seriously,
critical.
Right, to like block us and all that kind of stuff. It's ridiculous.